6 days after my mother's funeral, my older brother stood up in the middle of my grandmother's 82nd birthday dinner, tapped a fork against his water glass, and announced that our mother had left him controlling ownership of the company I had spent 11 years helping her build. I was 29 years old, still waking up every morning expecting to see Mom's name on my phone, and I had gone to that dinner only because my grandmother had called me herself and said, "Claire, honey, I already lost my daughter. I don't want to lose my birthday, too." So I put on the navy dress Mom had bought me the previous Christmas, drove 40 minutes across Knoxville, Tennessee, and sat through 2 hours of relatives asking whether I was holding up okay, before turning immediately to stories about themselves. I thought that would be the hardest part of the night. Then my brother Tyler pushed back his chair. His wife, Brooke, was sitting beside him with a leather folder resting on her lap. My father, who had been divorced from Mom for 17 years but had never stopped giving opinions about her business, folded his arms and looked at me with the expression he used whenever he had already decided I was about to be difficult. Tyler cleared his throat and said, "I wanted to wait until after the funeral because I was trying to respect Mom, but we need to deal with what she actually wanted." Brooke slid the folder across the table. Tyler continued, "Mom transferred 51% of Reed Signworks to me before she died. Claire, you've done a good job handling operations, but Mom believed the company needed a different kind of leadership going forward. I'll be taking over Monday." Nobody spoke. I could hear the ice settling in someone's tea. Then my father said, "Your brother isn't trying to hurt you. Don't make this ugly." That was the moment I understood the dinner had not accidentally turned into an ambush. The ambush was the reason Tyler had insisted I come. I opened the folder and found a 3-page equity transfer agreement, with my mother's name typed at the top, Tyler's at the bottom, and a scanned version of Mom's signature on the final page. Beneath it was another document instructing me to surrender banking access, vendor credentials, the keys to Mom's office, and possession of 2 company vehicles by 8 Monday morning. Tyler leaned back as if he had just closed a deal. "You can stay on as general manager if you want," he said. "I'm not unreasonable." Brooke gave me the soft smile she used whenever she wanted witnesses to remember how calm she had been. "This doesn't have to divide the family, Claire." I looked down at the signature again. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse him of forging anything. I pulled out my phone, photographed every page, and sent the images to Melissa Grant, the business attorney who had represented Mom and me for 7 years. Under the photos, I typed 5 words: "Call me as soon as possible." Then I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. Tyler asked, "Well?" I looked at him and said, "I understand what you're claiming." My father frowned. "That's all you have to say?" I nodded. "For tonight." Tyler mistook restraint for surrender. He smiled and reached for his drink. What he didn't know was that 4 months before Mom died, while she was still strong enough to drive herself to the office and argue with me about whether the break room refrigerator needed replacing, she and I had completed a transaction that changed the ownership structure of Reed Signworks completely. She had sold me all of her voting interest. The bank financed the purchase. The board approved it. The state filings had been made, and Mom retained only a small non-voting economic interest that would pass through her estate. She could no more have transferred 51% of voting control to Tyler than she could have sold him the Sunsphere. I didn't yet know whether Tyler had been fooled by somebody, whether Mom had signed something else I had never seen, or whether my brother had crossed a line I would never be able to uncross for him. I only knew the paper in front of me could not mean what he said it meant. If you are the daughter in your family who gets called when somebody's car breaks down, when a bill is overdue, when grandma needs a ride, when a form needs understanding, but somehow becomes selfish the first time you say no, then you already know why I didn't argue at that table. I had spent too many years defending myself to people who had already decided what they needed me to be. This time I wanted facts before feelings. My phone vibrated against my palm less than 2 minutes later. Melissa's message contained only 4 words: "Do not sign anything." I left the restaurant before cake. By the time I reached my car, Melissa was calling. I sat behind the steering wheel with the engine off while she reviewed the photographs on her computer. Claire, your mother did not own 51% of anything when this was supposedly signed, she said. The date on this agreement is 3 weeks before her death. By then, you owned 85% of the voting shares. Janine retained 15% of the economics and zero voting control. Tyler either has a document that is legally meaningless, or we have a more serious problem. I asked her what I should do first. That question mattered to me because I was not going to become the kind of protagonist who spends 3 weeks staring at threatening paperwork while everybody around her keeps escalating. Melissa told me to preserve the originals if I could, reset every company administrator credential Tyler had ever known, suspend any unused banking permissions, notify our outside accountant, and document any attempt he made to represent himself as an owner. Before I pulled out of the parking lot, I called our IT contractor. By 10:30 that night, Tyler's old vendor portal access had been disabled. By 11, the bank had added a verbal verification requirement to all transfers above $10,000. At 11:20, I emailed our management team a brief note saying there had been an unauthorized claim regarding company ownership and that no changes in authority were valid unless they came directly from me and our counsel. I did not mention Tyler by name. I did not want drama. I wanted a record. The next morning, the drama came anyway. At 7:14, my phone began lighting up with screenshots. Tyler had emailed supervisors from his personal account with the subject line, "New leadership, effective immediately." He called himself majority owner and incoming president. He instructed department heads not to approve capital spending without him. He told our purchasing manager he would be reviewing vendor relationships. Then, at 7:42, he showed up at the plant with Brooke and tried to enter Mom's office. Our facilities manager, Dawn, blocked the doorway and called me. I arrived 20 minutes later. Tyler was standing in the front lobby in khakis and a sport coat, arguing with a 63-year-old man who had installed signs beside my mother in freezing rain before Tyler had even graduated high school. "This is ridiculous," Tyler said when he saw me. "Tell him I own this place." I stopped 6 feet away. "You don't!" Brooke lifted her phone and began recording. "Claire, be careful what you say. We're documenting your refusal to honor your mother's wishes." I looked directly at the camera. "Good. Please keep recording." That unsettled her more than yelling would have. Tyler told me I had until noon to hand over Mom's office and company banking information or he would take legal action. I told him all communication could go through Melissa. He laughed. "You think hiding behind a lawyer is going to change Mom's signature?" I replied, "No. I think the truth about the signature will decide what it means." Then I asked Dawn to escort them out. By lunch, Tyler had posted a long message on Facebook accusing me of exploiting our mother's illness to steal the family business from her only son. Brooke shared it with photographs from the funeral. My father added a comment saying he had watched greed change his daughter. By that evening, distant relatives who had not called Mom once during her final 2 months were messaging me about honoring family. One aunt wrote, "Your brother has children. You're single. How much do you really need?" That sentence hurt more than I expected, not because I believed it, but because I had heard versions of it all my life. Tyler had 3 kids, therefore his mistakes became emergencies. I had no children, therefore my time belonged to everybody else. When Tyler was 24 and got behind on rent, I covered 2 months because Dad said the kids needed stability. When he lost his job at 31, Mom put him on payroll for almost a year doing sales support he rarely completed. When Brooke wanted to start an online decorating business, I let her use our warehouse photography area on weekends and never charged her. None of that had been a transaction. I had done it because they were family. But now Tyler was using the fact that I had been dependable as evidence that I had more than enough to surrender. That evening, standing alone in Mom's office, I finally cried. Not because I was scared of losing the company. The paperwork told me I wouldn't. I cried because her reading glasses were still beside the calculator, and 6 days after burying her, my brother had turned her handwriting into a weapon. I let myself have 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face, opened my laptop, and started a timeline. By Thursday afternoon, the problem had grown beyond the fake ownership paper. Melissa brought in a forensic document examiner named Aaron Feld and our outside CPA, Priya Shah. The first good news was simple. The alleged transfer agreement had never been filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State, our bank, our tax preparer, or the company's corporate records. The second piece was more interesting. The PDF Tyler emailed to two managers had metadata showing it had been created at 9:18 p.m. on the night after Mom's funeral. The document itself was dated almost a month earlier. That alone did not prove Tyler created it, but it gave us a reason to look harder. Aaron compared the signature image against legitimate documents from Mom's records, and noticed a small break in the lower loop of the J in Janine. I had seen that break before. We spent an hour looking through old files until Priya found it on a scanned vendor guarantee Mom had signed 3 years earlier. The break was identical, right down to a faint gray speck beside the last stroke. Aaron enlarged both images. They were not similar signatures. They were the same image. Someone had copied Mom's signature from an old document and placed it on the new agreement. I felt my stomach turn, but Melissa did not let me celebrate. "Forgery is serious," she said. "So we do this correctly. No social media confrontation, no family group chat. We preserve everything and determine how far this goes." Then Priya asked me a question that changed the entire direction of the story. Why did Tyler tell purchasing he was going to review vendors on his first morning? I shrugged. He likes sounding important. Priya shook her head. Maybe. Or maybe there's a vendor he was worried somebody else would review first. Mom had always let Tyler help bring in local sales leads, and for the past 8 months he had been allowed to recommend small subcontractors for overflow installation work. He had no authority to approve payments by himself, but when Mom became sick, some controls had gotten sloppy. Priya pulled a report of newly added vendors. One name appeared often enough to stand out. Volunteer Field Services. The company had been paid $186,400 over 11 months for installation assistance, emergency site labor, and equipment rentals. I recognized none of the jobs. Dawn didn't either. We opened the invoices. They looked plausible at a glance, but the project numbers belonged to contracts our own crews had completed. Priya searched the business registration. Volunteer Field Services had been organized 9 months earlier by a registered agent in Maryville. The mailing address was a rented mailbox. We kept going. An email search showed Tyler had personally forwarded 7 of those invoices to Mom's assistant with messages like, "Approved by Janine verbally. Please get this out today." Mom had been undergoing chemotherapy during several of those dates and had not been in the office. My throat went dry. This was no longer a brother inventing a sentimental claim after his mother died. Someone had been taking money while she was alive. At 4:36, Priya found the connection. The phone number on one early invoice matched a number Brooke had used 2 years earlier when she registered her decorating business. Melissa sat back in her chair and said nothing for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Now we have a motive for wanting control quickly. If Tyler could walk into the company as majority owner, he could replace accountants, restrict records, call the vendor payments legitimate, and perhaps bury whatever he and Brooke had done before the annual audit." The fake transfer was not the beginning of the scheme. It was an attempt to get ahead of the ending. I thought about Tyler telling our relatives that I was stealing from him. I thought about Brooke filming me in the lobby, hoping I would lose my temper on camera. I thought about my father telling me not to make things ugly. They had been depending on the oldest trick in our family: make Claire defend herself until she is too exhausted to examine what everybody else is doing. "What happens now?" I asked. Melissa said, "We send a preservation notice. We notify the insurer. We retain the records. And because the payments may involve fraud, we make a referral instead of playing detective beyond what we can lawfully document." I nodded. "And Tyler?" Melissa looked at me. "Tyler still thinks this is an ownership dispute. I would let him keep believing that until we know exactly what we can prove." The next 5 days were the strangest of my life, because my brother became more confident at the exact moment his position was collapsing. Tyler hired an attorney named Scott Delaney, who sent us a demand letter insisting the company recognize Tyler's controlling interest. Melissa responded with the stock ledger, purchase agreement, board resolutions, bank documents, and tax filings showing Mom had sold me voting control 4 months earlier. Scott called her within an hour. Whatever Tyler had told him had clearly not included that information. Meanwhile, Brooke launched a GoFundMe-style campaign asking friends to help them fight a wealthy sibling who stole a dying woman's legacy. They did not raise much, but the post traveled far enough that 2 customers called me. I did not argue online. I gave each customer the same sentence. There is a private family dispute involving a document our council considers invalid. Company operations and ownership remain unchanged. Then I went back to work. That mattered. We had 47 employees, several with spouses and children depending on their paychecks. I refused to turn their workplace into the set of my family's soap opera. Still, the emotional pressure kept coming. Dad appeared at my house Sunday afternoon without calling. I spoke to him through the doorbell camera. He said, "Your brother is willing to give you 49%, Claire. Think about how generous that is." I almost laughed. 49% of something he doesn't own? He stared at the camera. "Your mother wanted a man running the company. She told me that. That stopped me." Mom had spent most of her adult life being told the opposite, that women did not belong around cranes, permits, electrical crews, and commercial construction. She had built Reed Signworks after my father left because he told her the little vinyl lettering business she ran from our garage would never pay the mortgage. I was 17 when I started helping her after school. By 22, I was doing estimates. By 26, I was running operations. Dad had not stepped inside the plant in years unless there was a Christmas party. Yet now he was using Mom's voice to say something she would have despised. "Did she tell you that before or after she sold me the voting shares?" I asked. He went quiet. That was when I realized Tyler had not told him about the sale either. Dad's face changed for half a second, but pride recovered quickly. "Then she must have changed her mind later," I said. "If Tyler has a real document, his lawyer can prove it. You don't need to come to my house." He leaned closer to the camera. "Families should not need lawyers," I answered. "Families shouldn't need forged signatures either." He left. The following morning, something unexpected happened. My 24-year-old cousin, Madison, Tyler's favorite cousin, and one of the people who had initially liked Brooke's post, came to the office asking to see me. She looked embarrassed. "I think I have something you need." 3 weeks before Mom died, Tyler had asked Madison, who worked at a shipping store, whether she could scan a damaged old contract at high resolution. He sent her a page containing Mom's signature, and later asked whether she knew how to remove a background from an image. Madison had shown him a free website and forgotten about it. After seeing the ownership document online, she became suspicious. She brought screenshots of their messages. I asked why she had decided to help me. She looked at the floor. "Because Brooke called you a liar, and I remembered helping Tyler isolate Aunt Janine's signature. I don't know what he used it for, but I don't want to be the person who keeps quiet because he's family." For the first time since the funeral, someone in my family had chosen truth without asking what it would cost them socially. I thanked her and sent the screenshots to Melissa. That afternoon, Scott Delaney withdrew the demand that I recognize Tyler as majority owner. He did not withdraw as Tyler's attorney, but his tone changed completely. The next move came from Tyler himself. He emailed the company's board, which consisted of me, Mom's longtime advisor Sam Patel, and retired banker Judith Crane, demanding an emergency meeting where he could present evidence of Janine Reed's final wishes. Melissa recommended we accept. "He wants an audience," she said. "Give him one. But this time the room is yours." The board meeting took place the following Wednesday at 9 in the conference room overlooking the fabrication floor. Tyler arrived with Brooke, Dad, and Scott. I had Melissa beside me, Priya across the table, and Sam and Judith at the far end. Dawn was not invited because I didn't want employees watching a family implosion. Tyler entered carrying the same leather folder Brooke had brought to Grandma's dinner, except now it was thicker. He looked tired but determined. Brooke looked furious. Dad would not meet my eyes. Scott looked like a man who had told his client several times not to do whatever he was about to do. Judith called the meeting to order and asked Tyler to explain his claim. He stood, My mother wanted me to control Reed Signworks. Claire pressured her during her illness into transferring shares, but Mom corrected that mistake before she died. I have a signed agreement giving me 51%. Melissa asked. 51% of which shares? Tyler frowned. The company. Voting or non-voting? He looked toward Scott. Scott did not answer for him. Tyler said, controlling shares. Melissa placed the certified stock ledger on the table. On the date listed on your document, Janine Reed owned no voting shares. She had already sold them to Claire under a transaction approved by the board, financed by First Volunteer Bank, reported for tax purposes, and recorded in the company books. She retained 15% non-voting economic interest. Even if your document were authentic, which we dispute, she could not transfer property she no longer owned. Tyler's mouth opened, but Brooke jumped in. That sale was manipulated. Claire took advantage of a dying woman. I finally spoke. Mom proposed the sale 11 months before she died, when none of us knew she was sick. The closing was delayed because the bank required an updated valuation. Her diagnosis came later. Priya slid the original valuation timeline forward. Brooke did not touch it. Tyler's face had begun to pale. Then Melissa placed two enlarged images side by side. The signature from his agreement and the signature from the old vendor guarantee. These are not merely similar, she said. A document examiner concluded the signature image in your agreement was copied from this 3-year-old file. The same pixel defects appear in both. In addition, the electronic version distributed by you was created after Janine's funeral. Dad whispered, Tyler? My brother looked at him. They're twisting technical details. Melissa added Madison's screenshots to the table. For several seconds, nobody moved. Brooke stared at them first, then at Tyler. That interested me. Either she had not known how he obtained the signature, or she was better at pretending than I thought. Tyler pointed at me. This is exactly what Claire does. She overwhelms people with paperwork until they give up. I felt something old in me want to explain every year, every sacrifice, every reason I deserve to be believed. I let that impulse pass. No, I said. Paperwork is just where facts stay after people change their stories. Then Priya opened the second binder. There is another reason we needed this meeting. Tyler sat down slowly. She explained the volunteer field services payments. She explained the duplicate project numbers. She explained the invoices processed while Mom was absent and the connection between the vendor contact information and Brooke's previous business number. Brooke stood so quickly, her chair rolled backward. I had nothing to do with Tyler's company stuff, Priya said calmly. No one here is making a criminal conclusion. We are documenting what the company records show and what has been referred for investigation. Brooke turned on Tyler. You said those invoices were consulting work. The room changed. Tyler stared at her as if she had struck him. Scott closed his eyes. Melissa asked Brooke to sit down, but she grabbed her purse instead. No, he told me the company owed him. He said his mother was paying him outside payroll because Claire would complain. Tyler snapped. Shut up, Brooke! Scott immediately said, Tyler, do not speak. Brooke laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You told me your mom approved everything. Tyler said nothing. Dad looked 20 years older than he had at Grandma's dinner. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. This was my brother. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike when I was 6, holding the back of the seat until I stopped wobbling. I remembered sleeping on his bedroom floor during thunderstorms. I remembered giving him $500 when his first child was born because he was scared about diapers. The person sitting across from me had not always been a villain. Maybe that was why the betrayal hurt. People like to imagine boundaries become easy once someone has done enough damage. They don't. Sometimes the hardest boundary is the one you set while remembering every good thing that came before it. Tyler finally looked at me. You're going to destroy me over money? I shook my head. No. I'm protecting 47 people, Mom's work and myself. What happens to you depends on what you did, not on whether I hide it. He said, You're my sister. I answered, That was supposed to matter before today too. Judith formally rejected Tyler's ownership claim. The board authorized continued cooperation with our insurer, accountant, and investigators. Scott asked for a private conference with his client. The meeting ended without police bursting through the doors, without anybody being dragged away, and without me delivering some perfect speech that made everyone applaud. Real consequences are quieter at first. They arrive in emails, retained counsel, frozen access, interviews, audit schedules, and the sudden realization that people no longer accept your version of events just because you say, family, before demanding something. 3 months later, the investigation was still moving, because real cases do not wrap themselves up between dinner and dessert. The forged ownership document had been referred to local authorities, and our insurer's fraud unit was reviewing the vendor payments. Tyler eventually admitted through counsel that he created the transfer agreement, although he continued disputing how much responsibility he had for the questionable invoices. Brooke filed for separation. Dad stopped calling me for several weeks, then sent a letter instead. He did not apologize perfectly. He wrote that he had believed Tyler because Tyler told him what he already wanted to believe, that a son should inherit the business and a daughter without children would eventually sell it anyway. Reading that sentence hurt, but it also clarified something I had spent years trying not to see. Dad's favoritism had never been a measurement of my value. It was a habit built from his own expectations, and I had spent half my life trying to earn a ruling from a judge who had decided the case before I entered the room. I wrote back that I loved him but would not resume a relationship built around pretending the previous months had not happened. If he wanted contact, it would start slowly, without messages from Tyler, without business advice, and without calling my boundaries selfish. Grandma called me the day after he received the letter and said, "Your father is pouting." I told her, "He can pout." She laughed so hard she started coughing. At the company, life became ordinary again, which turned out to be the thing I wanted most. Dawn complained about delivery drivers blocking the west gate. Priya kept sending me reports with tabs I pretended not to hate. Our installers argued about college football. The new break room refrigerator finally arrived, and I stood in front of it remembering how Mom had insisted the old one still had another year in it, even though the freezer door had been held shut with painter's tape. One Friday evening, after everybody left, I went into her office. For 3 months, I had kept it almost untouched because moving anything felt like agreeing she was not coming back. Her yellow legal pad still had a list on the top page in her handwriting: renew truck insurance, call Sam, ask Claire about new router, buy decent coffee. I sat in her chair and cried harder than I had at the funeral, not because of Tyler, not because of the audit, because grief had finally found a room where it did not have to compete with an emergency. When I finished, I packed her personal things carefully. I took the photograph of us standing beside our first company van, both of us sunburned and grinning because we had landed a grocery store contract worth more than anything we had done before. I kept her chipped green coffee mug. I left her brass nameplate on the desk until the next Monday, when I replaced it with a small plaque in the lobby that read, "Janine Reed, Founder." Beneath it, I added a sentence from something she had told me years earlier when I was afraid to fire a customer who screamed at our staff. Being generous does not require being available for abuse. I wish I had listened sooner. I wish Tyler had chosen differently. I wish Dad had protected both his children instead of teaching, one that consequences were negotiable and the other that love meant cleaning up the mess. But I stopped wishing those truths into different shapes. Reed Signworks survived. Every employee kept a job. We tightened purchasing controls, added dual approval for new vendors, and created a written succession plan that no one could twist into a family legend later. I also stopped paying Tyler's phone bill, something I had somehow continued doing since his layoff years earlier without even thinking about it. That little cancellation made me laugh when I saw it on my statement, not because I wanted him to suffer, because I finally understood how many invisible strings I had allowed people to tie around me in the name of being a good daughter and a good sister. Cutting them did not make me cruel. It made the relationships honest. Some relationships survived honesty, some did not. Grandma still calls every Sunday. Madison comes by the plant for lunch sometimes. Dad and I have had coffee twice, both times awkward, both times without discussing the company. Tyler and I have not spoken directly since the board meeting. Maybe we will someday. Maybe we won't. I no longer organize my life around forcing an ending that makes everybody comfortable. What I know is that 6 days after burying my mother, my brother placed a fake document in front of me and expected grief, guilt, and family pressure to make me hand over what he had not earned. For most of my life, that strategy might have worked on something smaller. I might have paid the bill, covered the mistake, swallowed the insult, or apologized for saying no. But that night I did one simple thing differently. I stopped trying to convince my family that I was a good person, and I started protecting the truth. Once I did that, the rest was just evidence.